Hello, Command229 here, another Topic of the Week video. Christmas month continues with another positive Resident Evil topic. This week's topic was submitted by Angel89, and her topic is: what is your favorite Resident Evil game and why? What about the story, characters, mechanics, and gameplay made it the best? Favorite weapon from that game? Favorite boss fight? Favorite memories of that game? How did it evolve Resident Evil for you? Okay, so I know this is going to be kind of cliche, but my favorite game in the series is Resident Evil 4. Now, I may be a little biased because it was the first Resident Evil game that I played, and it's what got me into the series in the first place. But it is a really good game. There's a reason why Resident Evil 4 is still to this day such a critical darling and is so beloved by people. And it's been ported to everything. It's just that good. Now, in terms of the first thing I want to talk about is the story. And while I do like the storyline of Resident Evil, well, for the most part, the modern stuff can be really hit or miss. But what I've always loved about Resident Evil is how it really embraces its camp. And Resident Evil 4 does this a lot. Like in Resident Evil, it's always had a degree of silliness to it. Now, they generally take things pretty seriously in the story, but it's got a bit of a nudge nudge wink wink in the, yeah, we know this is silly, just roll with it kind of a thing going on. Like in the first game, not as much. The second game, a little more ridiculous. By the time you get to Nemesis and Code Veronica, and then 4, it's like, okay, yeah, we know there's a lot of cheesy stuff in this game, but it's awesome, right? Now, I said this before, but I've never been all that good with tank controls. Even trying to play them, it just feels a little awkward to me. I'd really have to spend a lot more time getting used to the controls. And, you know, Resident Evil 4 is actually a really good jumping on point. Because it does it does have sort of like tank style controls. It is, you know, with the third person over the shoulder camera, it does feel a little more modern. And it's a lot easier to get the hang of than it would be to say go play Resident Evil 2 or Code Veronica, just because it's more updated. Now, the story of Resident Evil 4 is interesting in a lot of ways. It can be absolutely ridiculous, and it is absolutely ridiculous. That's one of the things I love about it. While I do like stories being solid, well-written, you know, there are certain rules that apply to different genres, and, you know, different things that are, you know, of what it actually is. Like, you know, you don't judge a serious drama in the same way you would judge a comedy. And I think when you look at something like Resident Evil, and then not even just talking about video game stories, because a lot of video games don't have that great of stories. There are some amazing stories in video games. But, you know, what qualifies a good story in a video game is a little different than what you would classify a good story for a movie or a TV show. Just because the medium is different, and you need to incorporate the player in it. And, you know, when you look at the story of Resident Evil 4, it's fairly simple. I mean, there are some twists in there, here and there, but for the most part, if you look at it, it's Leon, a character from Resident Evil 2, from one of the older games, comes back as a government agent, and he's there to rescue the president's daughter, who's been kidnapped by a bunch of crazy cultists in Spain. While he's there, hijinks ensue. That is ultimately the plot. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between Leon arrives and Leon gets out. That's kind of the thing with Resident Evil. And that's one thing that's so wonderful about video games, is that you can have what is ultimately a really simple concept, and then you can make a good game out of it. Now, with the story, I like a good video game story that it's fun to play, and it's fun to see what happens next. It's fun to get the anticipation for what's going on, and especially you have a lot of great moments in this. One of the highlights is basically, I mean, I have to say, it's the knife fight with Krauser. But you also have good moments of basically any scene that Ada shows up in, scenes with Luis, I should say Luis is how Leon pronounces it. When he's dying, he's like, Luis! And what's interesting though is when you also get into the Separate Ways campaign, and that's really what adds the extra layer of really cool stuff going on, where it's like, oh yeah, well, Wesker was hinted at. It's like, no, Wesker is involved and he's pulling the strings behind the scenes. I've talked about what I love about Wesker before when in October, but seeing Wesker there and actually seeing him talking to Ada and basically talking about his plans, it's so cool to see that. And that's really kind of stuff that ties it a bit more to the overarching narrative, because overall Resident Evil 4 is steps away from a lot of the stuff that was going on, because Umbrella is gone. And Umbrella was central to Resident Evils 1, 2, 3, and even Code Veronica. And that was mostly related to the Ashfords and stuff on Rockford Island and of course, and the Antarctica. So, but seeing this step away and having Umbrella not be directly involved in stuff, because as the opening narration of Resident Evil 4 says, yeah, Umbrella got shut down years ago. It's like, oh, And I did like the fact that they managed to create a solid story. I mean, solid as much as something ridiculous like this can be, but it's an enjoyable story that doesn't rely on some of the stuff that the previous games had come to rely on. Even zombies get an upgrade in this with the Ganados. The Ganados are a lot smarter than your average zombie. They do a lot more, and it's not just something like, say, a tyrant that can do more than your average zombie. So there's a lot of things that really step away from, but it still feels at its core Resident Evil. And I think one of the things that really does that is the characters. And Leon, this game is probably single-handedly the reason why Leon ended up becoming the most popular character in the series. And if he's not, he's one of the most popular characters in the series. I don't watch too many polls or anything, but, the fact that he's in everything, the fact that he's in a lot of these games, the fact all of the CGI movies feature Leon. He is immensely popular. I think Resident Evil 4 is the reason why this guy ended up becoming so freaking popular. Leon is so fun in this game. He can be ridiculous. He can be just sarcastic. And it's actually really interesting from this because one thing I've talked about before in the past about Resident Evil is seeing certain things with the characters evolving and the characters growing and changing. And one of the things that's great to see is Leon having moved from being a rookie cop to highly trained government agent. And this is actually something that was built up in the Resident Evil 3, or in Leon's epilogue for Resident Evil 3, of him being taken in by the government. And they kind of strong-arm him to work for him, like, well, that's a nice Sherry there. It'd be a shame if something happened to her if you don't work for us. So, yeah, it kind of started off. And I would have liked to have seen that really developed a little bit more in some way at some point. Not in Resident Evil 4, but just, it'd be nice to see them kind of develop that, because it's not really like he's unwilling, but it's nice to see that, Leon has done something more than, he's moved on. In the same way I like the fact that you have Chris and Jill working and founding the BSAA, in the modern times. And it's like, okay, no, that's a nice way to move forward their characters. They took the skills and all the things that they've learned from their time surviving against all the crap that was going on in the sort of original era, like the Umbrella era. And they're like, okay, but this bioterrorism is still a problem, so we're starting a group and we're working with this, essentially a military organization to stop bioterrorism. And no, that's great. That's exactly what they would do. Just in the same way, I like the fact that Claire ended up working with TerraSave, trying to do stuff and help out and provide support and, all sorts of other, good stuff to help people who have suffered from bioterrorism. I liked seeing these characters move forward in a way that, it keeps the core of their characters the same, but it builds them up as, as they got older and as time goes on, they have evolved as characters. And it's nice to see Leon do that. But aside from Leon, Ada, and Wesker, almost the entire cast is just completely, almost the entire cast is completely new. It's nice to see Hunnigan, Leon's, main contact with, with the mainland, and someone who's sort of, being his, what was it? It's like his support, like what you'd have in Resident Evil, or not Resident Evil. What am I saying? Metal Gear, and you have support characters like Colonel Campbell or Mei Ling. So it's nice to see her, and the way that she and Leon talk is great. And I like some of the banter that they have. And Hunnigan is a great character, even if you don't really see much of her, which is why I'm glad to see her in other stuff. I liked seeing her in Resident Evil 6. I'd like seeing her get a bit of show in some of the movies, even if it's very minor. It's nice to see her referenced as Leon's consistent his support. You got Krauser. A lot of people loved Krauser to the point where they actually brought him back in Darkside Chronicles and had a story of him and Leon working together, which sort of was it was trying to sort of build up on the idea that he and Leon had worked together before, because they start talking about that in Resident Evil 4, and he's never been in a previous game before that, so a lot of people are like, who's this guy? Basically, Krauser comes in and he's like, remember me? But yeah, even some of the villains, the villains really are, not super deep, because this is Resident Evil, and Sadler's a ridiculous cult leader, and he's such a different type of villain. I mean, okay, he's still a crazy type of villain who wants world domination, but he's going to use, he has this elaborate plan to kidnap the president's daughter and sort of infect the president and put him under his control and sort of take over the United States and then, and then the world. But it's really the personality of these villains. It's good. Even Mendez, the village chief, who he doesn't have much of a personality, but his imposing stature and the fact that he has this really creepy, ominous vibe to him. Well, that's because he's infected. I mean, he's basically a zombie, a super zombie. But he's memorable, and that's a lot of these characters are. They're memorable. Mendez, even a simple character like Mendez is memorable. Salazar is probably one of the characters, the villains in this game, that everyone remembers just because of how freaking extra he is. He is so over the top, it's ridiculous. You go into this castle, and you're like, alright, we're gonna have to survive in this castle. And then this little midget comes out, and he's just like, Leon Kennedy, welcome to my castle. I am, was it Ramon Salazar? And it's like, this guy is a villain for a good chunk of the game. Well, what's even funny is if you actually start looking at the notes in the game, you get a little more detail about the history of the Salazar family and their connections to the Las Plagas parasite. And there's actually a bit more story going on there. In fact, with the story, there's actually a bit more depth that's going on in the villagers, and it's something that's not even directly told to you. You actually get a lot of this through the credits, and you start seeing. It's basically like a storybook. It's actually something that Ada is looking through. You can actually see some of those pictures in a book Ada is looking at in separate ways. But it's actually really heartbreaking, and it really almost made me cry when I first played the game all those years ago. Where you see the Las Plagas being introduced, and it was just a peaceful village, just a little isolated in the middle of nowhere village, and then Las Plagas is introduced, and all these people are suddenly... They're warped from being these just farmers and stuff into being monsters and slaves to Salazar, and not Salazar, but Sadler, and it's like, wow, and it's like, and even some of the horrifying imagery you see in the game, it's like, these people were just regular people. They were not monsters all this time. It's like, but it's even worse than it is with zombies, because with the zombies there was this big outbreak, but it's like, no, but it's like you had a crazy psycho like Sadler manipulating everyone, and it's like, wow, they don't even have to put text with this. It's just pictures. I'm like, wow. Like, I didn't expect some effective storytelling like that in Resident Evil. I didn't expect a Resident Evil game to start making me tear up on that. Like, yeah, jerks. But it's like, oh, but you have all this great stuff in the game like that. You've got some interesting ties to the overarching canon, mostly through Wesker. And it's like I said in my Wesker video. Wesker is just like, the fact that he's got his hands in every single pot means that he's always connecting everything. But, and it was nice to see that, and the way they handled the characters was great. It was really nice to see Ada, and seeing her in, I guess at the time, the next generation of hardware. You got to see her a little bit. You got to see her more in after what happened in Resident Evil 2, and it is interesting to see. And it's something that I really liked with Leon's character that actually ended up getting sort of dismissed and kind of retconned. Is the fact that you see Leon be very cool when it comes to Ada, and and it's really weird because you see that in like a Resident Evil 6 where he's like obsessed with her, and it's like no. In this game, he's very like chill with her, and even you see he knows what's up. Like, he knows the game, and he's not the naive like cop that he was way back then. So he doesn't like fawn over Ada, and well, there are moments that are kind of like, Ada, wait, mainly because she always keeps running off. He's not like, oh, Ada, wait, every single time. It's more of a typical kind of a thing. So it's nice to see that Leon's character is evolved in that regard. And that's what I said before about the characters evolving. It's really nice to see that. It's nice to see that they're not just, the same characters that they were, or they're not doing something horribly stupid in order to do something different with the character. And it is actually kind of interesting considering how many different versions of Resident Evil 4 there were and how long it took them to actually get the game to where it was. But it was all well worth it, and after all the iterations that they went through, it is nice to see that when they settled on this, it's nice to see that what we got was actually a great Leon. And it's funny because you can actually see where Resident Evil spun off Devil May Cry, because of the sass and from Leon. It's like, yeah, you can really connect that to Dante quite a bit. Now the mechanics. Now Resident Evil 4 is very different with the mechanically wise because it does shift from sort of an over-the-top third-person view that has fixed camera angles to being over-the-shoulder. And while it essentially in a lot of ways plays very similar, because if you actually look, like some people have done mods and stuff where they show a Resident Evil but done with fixed camera angles, and it's almost identical to the old games and how it functions. It's just that the camera, the change in the camera angle changes the way it feels quite a bit. And I really like it in this regard because I've never been a fan of fixed camera angles like that. It's not that they don't work. It's just the fact that I've never really been as big on them. And you really do need tank controls for a lot of those things, and that's why when you look at games like old Resident Evil and Silent Hill, where you have those fixed camera angles, or camera angles that are constantly changing and moving. Like, I know Silent Hill does that, where you have some of the camera angles will change, but you do need tank controls to function properly with that. And I think that Resident Evil 4, the way it handled it, really struck a nice balance from it. You still have a lot of the same feel with the controls, but it really updates it. It really does. Like, it was a big leap from the old Resident Evil games, and it was earth-shattering for the game industry and how games were designed. And it is interesting really to see that and see how the game really changed things. Now, it's more actiony approach to things isn't bad, and it's something some people think is that it's actually not a bad thing. It's really good for this because it definitely fits the B-movie atmosphere that Resident Evil really always had, and it just kind of, for the most part, ended up embracing. But because if you actually look at games, and you look at Resident Evil, and you look at Resident Evil 2, then Resident Evil 3, then Code Veronica, then 4, you can actually see an increase in the action. While Resident Evil ended with blowing up the Tyrant with a rocket launcher, then you go to like Resident Evil 2 where they're on a speeding train with G-Burk and it's like trying to kill them, and there's huge explosions and they barely make it out alive. And then 3 ends with with Raccoon City being blown up by a nuclear missile as they're flying out. And then Code Veronica just outright starts off with this because it's Claire. This is my favorite moments of Claire, like invading that umbrella base, and then she's like running from like all the helicopters shooting at her, and she does that one iconic scene where she's got the gun, she drops it, she grabs it, and she shoots the exploding barrels behind those guards and blows everything up before she's captured. And you've got some ridiculous stuff like that. And, Resident Evil 4 is really just sort of the culmination of that approach. It's just a little bit more consistently placed throughout the game than some of the others. Mainly because you can't really do as much as that with the old controls. The way they structured this, and especially with the QuickTime events. And the QuickTime events are not bad in this game. They're actually really good, and I do like them. The problem is a lot of games really took the wrong lessons from Resident Evil 4, and even other games like Shenmue, which I think Shenmue did have a little too much in terms of QuickTime events, but like with Resident Evil 4 really popularized it. And the problem is, it's like, okay, let's just throw QuickTime events on everything for literally anything, because that makes things more exciting. No. What makes it exciting is all of a sudden, boom, you have this QuickTime event you have to do, whether it's mashing the buttons or pressing multiple buttons at the same time, or just pressing a button. It's stuff like that. You have different things you have to do and pay attention to, and it does sort of like keep you invested in what's going on, particularly with things like when the rope wraps around Leon's leg after fighting the what's it called, slipping my mind, the gigantic fish, alligator, monster, whatever thing. At the end of that, it's like, and you have to cut the ropes. It's like oh no, okay, wow. And it's like, it's supposed to sort of help you feel that intensity and that, the urgency of it. It's the same thing with the running segments, like with the boulders. And it's like, oh crap, press, gotta run. And even with the knife fight with Krauser, it's a great QTE scene, because it's a fun scene, but it's also really intense, because you gotta hit those buttons right, or else Leon is instantly dead. And they sprinkle these throughout the game. And, but it's not like completely overwhelming, but it is something that does help make the generally a little more slow gameplay a little more exciting at certain points. And I think they're handled in a nice way here, a lot better than something like Resident Evil 6. And it's like, QTE for finding the keys! Yay! Oh, the QTEs in that game were terrible. But this is a positive month, so let's talk positively. A lot of those things with the gameplay, and even with the level design, it's actually a bit more linear in some ways than some of the other games. There is still some backtracking, but it's really kind of less, it's less important. I mean, so the games did move a little more linear, but, Resident Evil 4 is more like, you have this area, you do your thing, you move on to the next area. And sometimes you come back through certain areas, like sometimes you'll sort of loop around. Like, especially the times when you come back to the main village that you start the game at. Or there's actually some nice moments like when you can get the broken butterfly magnum. Like, you see a place where you can reach over, but it's too high for one person to get through. So after you get, Ashley, if you go back to that spot, and then you can get Ashley to go over and unlock the door, then you can get the broken butterfly in there. Which I remember doing that. I felt really cool doing that in my first playthrough. There's less major stuff like that, because there's a little bit of that. For the most part, it's fairly linear. but it does keep the pace of things going on, and the way the level design is done. It does feel like it has a nice pacing when you're going through it. So even if you're not doing as much backtracking, and I mean, backtracking isn't inherently a good thing too. So it is nice the way the game is structured, and it felt nice. They did it good the way they did it. But no, it actually is really solid level design, and especially when they give you, in some cases, like the first village works great as sort of an arena where it's like, okay, you have a problem. A bunch of these ganados are trying to kill you. What do you do? And once you know what you're doing, it's really not super difficult. Executing it can be difficult, but I remember and it's so funny because I remember I was playing this with Angel Rin on the PS4 version of Resident Evil 4, and it's been years since I played Resident Evil, and then of course I played the Wii version, not the GameCube version. So when I first kind of got my hands on it, and it's like I remember that section so vividly, even all of these years later. I remember that section, and I remember the way you do it, the certain combos. It's the run up, knife, kick, then knife, 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 and it's just like, and then sort of hurting the ganados around in certain ways to like bottleneck them, and always trying to watch around so they don't come up behind you. And it felt so good. It's like, and that's something that's so great about this game, is that so much of it feels memorable. Even stuff that's just so basic. It's like, yeah, it's just the beginning part of the game where they first start introducing you to the enemies, and then they are like, here, now we're going to throw a chainsaw guy at you. And it's like... and it's so funny because it's still fun to go back and try that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that really sort of works in making this a great game, and Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, and a lot of this stuff really contributes to it. It's not just because it's one of my favorite Resident Evil games. It is, in fact, one of my favorite games of all time. It's probably top 5. It's up there with Metal Gear Solid 3 for me, in terms of games like that I absolutely love to death. I played this game like 6 times. Pretty sure it was 6 times. Anyway, I played it a lot. I must have poured well over 100 hours into this game just when I first got it. And I'm going to get the Switch version when it comes out and play it again. And I do also have a professional playthrough on the Wii version that I never finished. I got almost done with that. I should probably finish that sometime. Anyway. My favorite weapon in the game, easily, the Chicago typewriter. And that's one of those games you can only get on a New Game Plus, because 1, you won't be able to unlock it immediately, and 2, you simply won't have the money for it. In fact, the first time I was playing the game, it was on my second playthrough, and I had gotten a little bit into the castle when I had enough money. I had a million, what was it, pesetas? Whatever. But it's like I had a million of them to buy the gun, and yeah, you don't need the TMP anymore after that. It's like infinite ammo, and doing 10 damage per shot, and it's rapid fire since it's an automatic weapon. Like, oh my gosh, you can destroy bosses with that so easily. It's actually really fun. Because I remember once I got that gun, I was like, I practically didn't use anything. It was just like Chicago typewriter. And one of my favorite moments with the Chicago typewriter was actually when I was playing against Salazar in his boss fight. It's literally just, bah, all right, now he's exposed. Bah, all right, now he's dead. Boom, that was easy. And it's really funny to do that. It's especially great once you have the second set of outfits, and you get Leon in his gangster outfit, and the Chicago typewriter changes to look more, old-timey. And then Ashley gets her invincible suit of armor, which is amazing. It actually makes her being a hindrance when she's with you to being like, no, I want her with me all the time. You stick her out in the middle, of enemies, and, she can't die, she can't be picked up. They'll all gravitate towards her, And then, you can just like blow stuff up and you can never hurt her. It's amazing. It actually got to the point where once that happened, I was sad that she kept, being kidnapped. I'm like, no, no, my indestructible bait. It's such a great weapon. I mean, the infinite rocket launcher is great, but I got that on like my third playthrough. And, that was fun, just to mess around with. Favorite boss fight? There are some good boss fights. I think my favorite boss fight would have to be the Krauser boss fight on the island. Not the knife fight, but the knife fight is amazing. It's the fight in sort of like the little ruins area. And that's just because it's such an interesting section. It really kind of breaks away from the typical structure. It's not just, okay, you're in this area, you need to fight and kill him. No, there's a lot of little things that happen. And you have like these different stages to the fight and going through him, and the different levels to it, and the parts where he will literally leap out of nowhere to attack you, and you have to do these QTEs to stop him. That actually did get me several times. And it is interesting just to see more interactions between Leon and Krauser. It's just an overall really fun section, and it's so different. And it sticks out to me more so than any of the other boss fights. The fights with Mendez, with Salazar, the giant fish monster thingy, with Sadler. You have all these boss fights, but the one with Krauser really stuck out to me because it was just different. And basically, pretty much everything about Krauser is awesome in that game. It is kind of a shame that he does die, but because he was such an interesting... He's such an interesting addition, because it's like, here, we're introducing this new guy that, oh yeah, everyone else basically already knows. But they did it effectively. To get him in... But they did introduce him in a way that made him very intriguing, and there's a reason why he ended up becoming pretty popular. Oh, and memories. I have a lot of memories, so I won't go into all of them because there are some amazing memories. Some of my favorite memories actually do come from my repeat playthroughs, because once I got to like my fourth playthrough, I had so much extra stuff, and like I had like several like major weapons. Like I had the Chicago typewriter and the infinite rocket launcher from the very beginning. I'm just like destroying everything. I already talked about that boss fight with Salazar with the Chicago typewriter, but one of the things I had is when like playing with the infinite rocket launcher, just being like, this is totally ridiculous, and just and I remember, like, especially when it came to a Dr. Salvador, I loved to just rocket launcher them and just gloat about how easy that was. And just anytime I would shoot, then and just be like, one hit, that's all it takes. I mean, of course, you could also pull out a Chicago typewriter and be like, dead. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting moments in the story. But it's so funny because this is one thing I love about games, that you can have so many memorable gameplay moments. Because there was a moment right after you meet Mendez in that little house, and you kind of go when you're exiting the house. There's a couple of Granados and Dr. Salvador. The first time I played the game, because you can find an incendiary grenade if you look around. I had this, like, I was looking in it, and I had sort of scoped it out, and I'm like, okay, I see Dr. Salvador, and I'm like, okay, how do I do this? So I got the incendiary grenade, and I threw it and got him, and of course, he's on fire. Some of the other Granados are on fire, so I run up, and, I'm just pumping ammo. I think I was pumping shotgun ammo into him, and, then another Granados comes up, and knife him, and then you kick him, and it's just taking down the Dr. Salvador. And I took him down fairly quickly, and I felt so proud of myself because, wow, it was like, I planned it out and I executed it, and I felt it really. This is one thing I love about these games is that yeah, that can be hard, but if you know what you're doing and you have it figured out, you can actually make it fairly easy. And actually, another one of my favorite moments actually came more recently when I was playing with Adrian on the PS4 version. We were playing and we got to that section right after you meet the merchant and you can get the rifle, and you have that sort of like area with all the little bridges and multiple levels and stuff. As we were sort of playing in that section, and I was playing, and there's a part on the other side, like on the far end. We've got multiple levels. You've got a level here, and then a very small little platform, and the ground level, and you have ladders coming through it. I ended up on the middle one, and there must have been something goofy with the AI, where they couldn't jump down onto the platform because you were there because it was so small. So then they would jump over you and onto the bottom, and then they would have to climb up to get to you. So you could sit. So we sat there on the platform, and I was sitting there and we're like knife, 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 knife. Anytime they came up, and there's this one great moment where one of them threw one. I think it was like a little axe or whatever at me, and I turned up and it was like bing, and I knocked it out of the air with the knife. And I just kept knocking down, and they kept climbing up, and you just knock him down, and it's like wow, it was so funny. We were laughing at that, and it was just so funny. It's finding ways to game the system is so fun. And the last one I want to talk about was actually from the first time that I ever played the game, because I actually got this very copy of the game. I got it for my birthday back when I was 17 or so. I was around that age. So my friends are like, hey, you expressed interest in Resident Evil, and you have a Wii, so we got you the Wii version of the game, which fairly recently had come out. So I had like 3 or 4 friends there, and 3 of them had played the game before, so they knew what was going on with this game. So that as we were playing through, I was playing, but they were all giving me advice because they were really excited that I was getting into Resident Evil, and it was a fun, jolly old time because they would be like, okay, no, don't go there. Like especially they were telling me like about the shotgun, and be like, don't go into the house while you're doing this because then then the Dr. Salvador guy will immediately come in. So they were giving me advice and tips, and it was fun. And then after that section is over, I went and got the shotgun. I'm like, oh wow, this is so cool. And then after they left, and then I went back to playing because I was having fun. And then I was playing it alone. And that's when I was like, oh. When you have a bunch of other guys around there who have all played this game a million times and all know every single inch of that game like the back of their hands, they're all giving you advice, and maybe you can pass the controller if you need some help. When you're there alone, and I was just like, and especially when you get to like the nighttime section early on, I was like, oh. Oh, and there were some scary moments for me then. Okay, no, I won't talk. There's a lot of memorable moments I have from this game, and I could spend an entire video just talking about some of my memorable moments that I had while playing the game. But yeah, needless to say, this game had so many memorable moments. Like, I have some memorable moments in video games, but I have so many in Resident Evil 4. And it's, there's a shocking amount of depth to this game, and a lot of little things that you can do to that you can do to make things more fun. And if you know what you're doing, you can really mess around in this game if you know what you're doing, and especially something you end up doing just after playing it so much. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 is a great game. So to end this, talking about how it evolved Resident Evil, I think this is something that needed to happen in Resident Evil. Even though things like Remake were great, they basically refined the old type of gameplay significantly. I think this move to the over-the-shoulder camera perspective was very important. The controls, like being able to shoot at someone in the leg or shoot them in the face, or even just knifing them in different parts, and and being able to do like context sensitive actions like kicking them or suplexing them, that's always funny. It's so it's really great because it really does there are little elements of this in like the old Resident Evils, but like this really moved things forward. And all the little things that you can do with like the fact that you can throw the eggs instead of using them to heal, and the little things like knocking down the wooden board over those little dirty wells so that when you knock down like a little pendant or something, it doesn't get dirty and really tarnishes its value. The way the level design and the way the gameplay works, and it's actually even better in the Wii version because you get to aim and specifically aim where it is, and it's a lot faster and more responsive than moving the cursor where you have to move. And it's not like terrible because I have played it and it's not really that bad, but having the cursor is really helpful. This is why a lot of people are really excited about the Switch version coming in. We'll have an HD version of this. But Resident Evil 4 really evolved it, and I think it took the very necessary step of separating it from the old era, because it's funny when you really think about it. Resident Evils 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, and Resident Evil 0 all take place within a few months of each other. That's 5 games. 3 of them, or like Resident Evils 2 and 3, both take place pretty much simultaneously. 0 and 1 take place very back to back, and you've got Code Veronica, which only takes place a few months later. So, and then Resident Evil 4 is like, okay, time skip. All right, we've separated ourselves. We're reinventing this, and I think that was a really good choice to make. I do think it was a flaw that they kept doing these big time skips. Like, no. The time skip with 4 was perfect. It time skipped it just enough to be like, okay, you can reasonably understand how Leon became so freaking awesome after years of training as a government agent. And, you can see the stuff with the BSAA. And it's like, okay, now that we've entered a new era, I don't think they needed as big of time skips after that. But it's like, and it did a lot to separate itself from the old part. Not in a bad way. It's not in the, okay, we're embarrassed from that. It's more of a, okay, we've been rooted in the whole Raccoon City Umbrella stuff for so long, and in a span of a few months in universe, it's like, okay, let's move from this and let's sort of start something new, because it starts feeling a little stale after 5 games like that. But it did it in a good way. And I think it was really good in helping Resident Evil 4 gain its own identity away from the old series. Or not the old series, but the older games. And, I think if they kept the same level of care with the game design and the way the characters were written, I think the future of the series wouldn't have been such a mess. But stuff like that does happen. But all in all, Resident Evil 4 is a great game. And yeah, that's about it for this. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask, put topic, and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So if there's anything good that you have to say about Resident Evil 4, and I'm sure there's a lot, please comment below. And thank you for watching.